Book of Heaven, Volume 17, Part 4. September 18th, 1924. Difference that exists between living in the will of God and doing the will of God. In order to understand what living in the divine will means, one would have to dispose oneself to the greatest of sacrifices, that of not giving life, even in holy things, to one's own will. I was worried about what has been written on the living in the divine volition, and I was praying Jesus to give me more light in order to explain myself better, so that I might be able to clarify more this blessed living in the divine will to those to whom I am obliged to do so. And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, they do not want to understand. To live in my will is to reign. To do my will is to be submitted to my orders. The first state is to possess. The second is to receive my orders and execute them. To live in my will is to make my will one's own, as one's own thing. It is to dispose of it. To do my will is to hold it as will of God, not as one's own thing, nor can one dispose of it as one wants. To live in my will is to live with one single will, that of God. And since it is a will all holy, all pure, all peace, and it is one single will that reigns, there are no contrasts. Everything is peace. Human passions tremble before this supreme will, and would want to shun it, nor do they dare to even move or oppose it, seeing that heaven and earth tremble before this holy will. So the first step of living in the divine will, what does it do? It lays the divine order in the depth of the soul, emptying her of what is human, of tendencies, of passions, of inclinations, and the like. On the other hand, to do my will is to live with two wills, and when I give orders to do mine, one feels the weight of one's own will that causes contrasts. And even if one follows the orders of my will with faithfulness, one feels the weight of one's rebellious nature, of one's passions and inclinations. How many saints, though they may have reached the highest perfection, feel their own will waging war against them, keeping them oppressed. And many are forced to cry out, "Who shall free me from this body of death?" That is, from this will of mine that wants to give death to the good I want to do. To live in my will is to live as a son. To do my will is to live as a servant. In the first state, what belongs to the Father belongs to the Son, and many times servants make more sacrifices than sons do. They have to expose themselves to more toilsome and more humble services, to cold, to heat, to traveling on foot. In fact, how much have my saints not done in order to execute the orders of my will? On the other hand, a son remains with his father, takes care of him, cheers him with his kisses and with his caresses. He commands the servants as if his father were commanding. If he goes out, he does not go out on foot, but travels in a carriage. And while the son possesses everything that belongs to his father, servants are given only the retribution for the work they have done, remaining free to serve or not to serve their master. And if they do not serve, they have no more right to receive any further compensation. On the other hand, between father and son, no one can remove these rights. That the son possess the goods of the father, no law, either celestial or terrestrial, can remove these rights, nor unbind the sonship between father and son. My daughter, the living in my will is the living that is closest to the blessed of heaven, and it is so distant from the one who does my will and is faithfully submitted to my orders, just as heaven is distant from the earth, just as the distance between a son and a servant, and between a king and a subject. And besides, this is a gift that I want to give in these times so sad, that they may not only do my will, but possess it. Am I perhaps not free to give whatever I want, whenever I want, and to whomever I want? Is a master not free to say to his servant, "Live in my house, eat, take, command like another me"? And so that no one may prevent him from possessing his goods, he legitimizes this servant as his own son, and gives him the right to possess. If a rich man can do so, much more can I do it. This living in my will is the greatest gift I want to give to creatures. My goodness wants to make ever greater display of love toward creatures. And since I have given them everything, and have nothing else to give to make myself loved, I want to give them the gift of my will, so that by possessing it, they may love the great good they possess. And do not be surprised if you see that they do not understand. In order to understand, they would have to dispose themselves to the greatest of sacrifices, that of not giving life, even in holy things, to their own will. Then would they feel the possession of mine, and would touch with their own hands what it means to live in my will. You, however, be attentive, and do not be bothered by the difficulties they raise, and I, little by little, shall make my way to make them understand the living in my will. September 22nd, 1924. Diabolical rage because Luisa writes on the divine will. The living in the divine will brings with itself the loss of any right of one's own will. I continue. While I was writing what is said above, I saw my sweet Jesus placing his mouth at the place of my heart and feeding me the words I was writing. At the same time, I heard a horrible din from afar, from some who were beating each other and roaring with such clamor as to strike fear. And I, turning to my Jesus, said to him, My Jesus, my love, who is making such a din? They seem to me like enraged demons. What do they want that they rage so much? And Jesus, my daughter, it really is them. They would want you not to write about my will. And when they see you write more important truths on the living in my will, they suffer a double hell, and they torment all the damned even more. They fear so much that these writings on my will might come out, because they see themselves losing their kingdom upon earth, that they acquired when man, withdrawing from the divine will, gave free step to his human will. Ah, yes, it was precisely then that the enemy acquired his kingdom on earth. And if my will could reign upon earth, my enemy, on his own, would shut himself up into the deepest abysses. This is why they rage with such fury. They feel the power of my will in these writings, and at the mere thought that they might come out, they fly into a rage and try anything they can in order to impede a good so great. You, however, do not pay attention to them, and learn from this to appreciate my teachings. And I, my Jesus, I feel that it takes your omnipotent hand for me to write what you say about the living in your will. In the face of the so many difficulties they raise, especially when they keep saying to me, how is it possible that no other creature has lived in your most holy will? I feel so annihilated that I would want to disappear from the face of the earth, so that no one may ever see me again. But against my will, I am forced to stay in order to fulfill your holy will. And Jesus, my daughter, the living in my will brings with itself the loss of any rights of one's own will. All the rights belong to the divine will. And if the soul does not lose her rights, it cannot be called true living in my will. At the most, it can be called living resigned, conformed. In fact, living in my will is not merely that she does her action according to my will, but that the whole interior of the creature gives place to neither one affection, nor one thought, nor one desire, and not even one breath, in which my will does not have its place. Nor would my will tolerate even just one human affection of which it is not the life. It would feel disgusted to let the soul live in my will with her own affections, thoughts, and other things that a human will could have. And do you think it is easy that a soul would willingly lose her rights? Oh, how difficult it is! Rather, there are souls who, when they reach the point of losing all the rights over their own will, draw back and content themselves with conducting a life in the middle. In fact, losing one's rights is the greatest sacrifice that a creature could do. But it is the one that disposes my goodness to open the doors of my will for her, and letting her live in it. to give her my divine rights in exchange. Therefore, be attentive and never go out of the boundaries of my will. October 2nd, 1924. Effects of the adoration done in the divine will, with the power of the Father, the wisdom of the Son, and the love of the Holy Spirit. I felt all embittered because of the privation of my sweet Jesus. Oh, how much harder and more bitter my exile becomes without He who forms the whole of my life. And I prayed Him to have compassion for me and not to leave me at the mercy of myself. Now, while I was saying this, my beloved Jesus made Himself seen as He was squeezing my heart tightly with His hands and then binding me all over with a little rope of light, but so tightly as to deprive me of the slightest motion. Then afterwards He laid Himself within me, and we suffered together. In the meantime, I felt myself being transported outside of myself, toward the vault of the heavens, and I seemed to encounter the Celestial Father and the Holy Spirit. And Jesus, who was with me, placed Himself between them, and He put me on the lap of the Father, who seemed to be waiting for me with so much love that He pressed me to His bosom, and identifying me with His will, He communicated His power to me. And so did the other two divine persons. But while they communicated themselves to me one by one, they all became one, and I felt I was being infused with, altogether, the will of the power of the Father, the will of the wisdom of the Son, and the will of the love of the Holy Spirit. But who can say what I felt as being infused in my soul? And my lovable Jesus said to me, "Daughter of our eternal will, prostrate yourself before our Supreme Majesty, and offer your adorations, your homages, your praises, in the name of all, with the power of our will, with the wisdom and with the will of our supreme love. We shall feel in you the power of our will adoring us, the wisdom of our will glorifying us, the love of our will loving us and praising us. And since the power, the wisdom, and the love of the three divine persons are in communication with the intellect, the memory, and the will of all creatures, we shall feel your adorations, homages, and praises flow within all the intelligences of creatures, that rising between heaven and earth shall make us hear the echo of our own power, wisdom, and love, adoring us, praising us, and loving us. Greater adorations, more noble homages, love and praises more divine, you cannot give us. No other act can equal these acts, or give us as much glory and as much love, because we see hovering within the act of the creature the power, the wisdom, and the reciprocal love of the three divine persons. We find our own acts in the act of the creature. How not to enjoy them, and not to give them supremacy over all other acts? So I prostrated myself before the Supreme Majesty, adoring it, praising it, and loving it in the name of all, with the power, the wisdom, and the love of their will that I felt within me. But who can say the effects of this? I have no words to express them. Therefore I move on. Then, afterwards, I received communion, and I was fusing myself in the will of my highest good, Jesus, in order to find the whole creation in it, so that no one might be absent from roll call. And together with me, all might prostrate themselves at the feet of my Jesus in the sacrament, to adore him, to love him, to bless him. But while I was doing this, I felt somehow distracted in trying to find all created things in his divine will, so that one might be the love, the praise, the adoration to my Jesus. And Jesus, in seeing me as though hampered, gathered the whole creation onto his lap and said to me, "My daughter, I placed all creation on my lap, that it may be easier for you to find and call everyone together with you, so that not one thing that came from me may not give me, through you, the return of love and adoration that befits me, as things that belong to me. I would not be fully content in you if any of them were missing. In my will, I want to find everything in you." Then it became easier for me to find and call all creation together with me, so that we all might praise and love my highest good, Jesus. But, oh marvel! Each created thing contained a distinct reflection and a special love of Jesus. And Jesus received the return of his reflections and of his love. Oh, how content was Jesus! But as I was doing this, I found myself inside myself. October 6, 1924. How the divine will is primary heartbeat of the soul and of all created things. I was fusing all of myself in the holy divine volition, and my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, how beautiful it is to see a soul fuse herself in my will." As she fuses herself in it, the created heartbeat takes its place and life in the uncreated heartbeat and forms a single one, and it runs and beats together with the uncreated heartbeat. This is the greatest happiness for the human heart, to palpitate in the eternal heartbeat of its creator. My will puts it in flight, and the human heartbeat flings itself into the center of its creator. Then I said to him, "Tell me, my love, how many times does your volition make its round within all creatures?" And Jesus, "My daughter, in each heartbeat of creature my will forms its complete round in all creation. And just as the heartbeat in the creature is continuous, and if the heartbeat ceases, life ceases, in the same way, my will more than heartbeat, in order to give divine life to creatures, makes its round and forms the heartbeat of my will in each heart. See then how my will is present in each creature as primary heartbeat, because hers is secondary. Even more, if she feels her heartbeat, it is by virtue of the heartbeat of my will. Even more, this will of mine forms in her two heartbeats, one for the human heart as life of the body, and one for the soul as heartbeat and life of the soul. But do you want to know what this heartbeat of my will does in the creature? If she thinks, my will runs and circulates like blood in the veins of the soul, and gives her the divine thought, that she may put aside the human thought and give place to the thought of my will. If she speaks, the word of my will wants its place. If she operates, if she walks, if she loves, my will wants the place of her work, of her step, of her love. The love and the jealousy of my will in the creature is so great that while it palpitates, if the creature wants to think, it makes itself thought. If she wants to look, it makes itself eye. If she wants to speak, it makes itself word. If she wants to operate, it makes itself work. If she wants to walk, it makes itself foot. If she wants to love, it makes itself fire. In sum, it runs and makes its round within each act of the creature, in order to take its primary place that is due to it. But to our greatest sorrow, the creature denies it this place of honor, and gives the place to her own human will. And my will is forced to remain in the creature as if it had no thought, no eye, no word, no hands, no feet, without being able to carry out the life of my will in the center of the soul of the creature. What sorrow! What highest ingratitude! But do you want to know who gives me free field and lets my will operate as heartbeat of life within her soul? The one who lives in my will. Oh, how well does my will carry out its life, and constitutes itself thought of her thought, eye of her eye, word of her mouth, heartbeat of her heart, and so with all the rest. Oh, how quickly we understand each other, and my will obtains the intent of forming its life in the soul of the creature. And it is not only in the creature with reason that my will holds its primary place, and is like heartbeat, that giving the circulation to the life of the soul, runs to give life to all the acts of the creature. But in all created things, my will holds its primary place, and circulates as heartbeat of life, from the tiniest created thing up to the greatest one. And none of them can move from the power and immensity of my will. My will makes itself life of the azure sky, and maintains its celestial color ever new and vivid. Nor can it fade, or change, or turn pale, because my will wanted it to be so, and once it is established, my will does not change. My will is life of the light and heat of the sun, and with its heartbeat of life, it preserves its light and heat ever equal and alive, keeping it immobile in my will, without being able to move, or to increase, or decrease, in the good it must do to all the earth. My will is life of the sea, and forms the murmuring of its waters, the darting of the fish, the roaring waves. Oh, how my will makes display of the power it contains, and carries out its life with such great majesty and absolute dominion in created things, that neither can the sea do without murmuring, nor can the fish do without darting. Even more, I could say that it is my will that murmurs in the sea. It is my will that darts in the fish. It is my will that forms the waves, and with its roaring makes itself heard. That its life is there, that can do everything as it best pleases. My will is heartbeat of life in the bird that warbles, in the cheeping of the chick, in the lamb that bleats, in the turtle dove that moans, in the plants that vegetate, in the air that every one breathes. In some, in everything, my will has its life, and forms with its power the act it wants. So it maintains harmony in all created things, and forms in them the different effects, colors, offices that each of them contains. But do you know why? To make myself known to the creature, to go to her, to court her, to love her, with as many different acts of my will, for as many things as I created. My love was not content with placing my will as heartbeat of life in the depth of her soul, but it wanted to place my will in all created things, so that also from the outside my will might never leave her, and she might be preserved and grow in the sanctity of my very will, and all created things might be incitement, example, voice, and continuous call for her, to make her always run in the fulfillment of my will, the only purpose for which she was created. But the creature makes herself deaf to the so many voices of creation, blind to the sight of so many examples, and if she opens her eyes, she fixes them on her own will. What sorrow! Therefore I recommend to you, never want to go out of my will, if you do not want to multiply my sorrow and lose the purpose for which you were created. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 17, Part 4. Fiat.